Hi, everybody. Kevin, we were just chatting a little bit before we came up here about your company and what you guys are doing. So do you want to kind of kick it off there?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So Kevin Nordker, co-founder and CEO of Ampair. We are focused on decarbonizing aviation. So a big transportation carbon emitter, quite challenging to find solutions for lower carbon, but there's an opportunity. New technology, especially in the electric vehicle industry, are driving low carbon alternatives to combustion engines. We've seen this in ground transportation for years with the adoption of hybrid electric vehicles and now fully electric vehicles, giving us all an option on how to travel on the ground without that as much fuel burn. In aviation, we're looking to do similar. So taking all that great technology that's been electrifying ground transportation, integrating it into the airplanes that fly and that you hear overhead, decreasing their fuel burn by over 50%, and doing that with technology that exists today. So huge impact, great environmental impact, economic development impact, and something that we're all super passionate about.
That's amazing. So in my job, I think about this a lot because I work in travel. I love to travel. My job is really to talk about the benefits of travel and to kind of, bring people to the wider world that travel opens up. But it's obviously on a lot of levels really incompatible with sustainability. And it's something I think about a lot and I reflect on a lot. And I really, on a personal level, struggle with how do you encourage people to travel while also knowing that travel is a huge polluter worldwide, and also knowing that travel is an essential economic component to a lot of places, right? And so kind of thinking about the future of aviation as being more sustainable is super interesting. I was telling Kevin this right before we came up, but I was having a conversation just a few days ago with someone who runs like a luxury tour operation, and how, talking to him about how they think about sustainability within their business. And what he said is there's nothing we can really do about the flights. Like the flights are not sustainable. So we kind of put those to the side and we look at sustainability through the rest of the business. So closer? Okay. Yeah, no problem. So we look at sustainability through the rest of the business. We look at once we have people on the ground in Egypt, if we need to bring them from here to here, how can we do that in a way that is less emissions heavy? Maybe it's about bringing them by boat, maybe it's about chartering a bus, but what we really try to stay away from is airplanes on the internal flights. And it's really interesting, hearing about what you're doing and thinking about how that has the potential to provide a more sustainable solution in the short term for that very, very thorny piece of the travel business.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When you think about travel, and this is a global challenge, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing places, especially in Europe, that are completely shutting down the regional aviation sector. And why are they doing that? It's because, there's no solution for it, right? It seems almost impossibly hard to solve. What's really exciting for us is that a lot of these we see them as opportunity spaces. People who oftentimes, because of it's a lifeline service, maybe it's medical, maybe it's giving them goods. I was just up in Alaska. We had flown one of our hybrid planes 3,400 miles from Southern California, hopping up through Canada and landing in Fairbanks, speaking with communities there that they have no ground access to their community, their city. Goods have to be flown in, doctors have to be flown in. There are times when there's really no other alternative. And in those cases where there are, people say, hey, let's put people on buses. The key is to get them out of carbon emitting individual occupancy cars, or a heavy emitter there, aggregating people together, and then providing this essential service to these communities.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you spoke about, saying just don't take planes is not a realistic thing, right? So it's the world as it's built now, removing airplanes from the equation is not a realistic solution. So it's about thinking about where the solutions lie.
Absolutely, because when you broaden the topic out to impact, total impact, you've got global climate we care deeply, deeply about. But also when you look at these communities that don't have air service, that don't have good transportation connectivity, their economy atrophies. These are not places that people want to live. They're not places that create jobs. They're ultimately, they struggle to be part of the global economy. The local producers can't get their goods to the global consumers. There's this cycle that is either inhibited by the lack of travel or significantly enabled by that connectivity. So what we're hoping to do is, by bringing lower cost and significantly lower emissions aircraft, we're able to connect these groups and these people who otherwise wouldn't be able to participate.
Yeah, it's I mean, you're speaking about kind of the interconnectivity and the necessity of people kind of, moving between places. Pre-pandemic, I was living for 2 years in Mexico in a small town there that was super tourism reliant. And when the pandemic hit, the town was shut down. A local vigilante group blocked both the entrances to town to keep, the pandemic out. And prior to this, I would say, I really felt like, tourism is just like, it's terrible for this place. It's taking this incredible local community and it's kind of run rampant, and it's taking away a lot of the things that are amazing about it. But when the town shut down, within a week, nobody had any money to buy food. And it was so clear that you can't just shut down the way things are now, right? It's not as simple as this isn't working, let's go over here. It has to be about looking for solutions that kind of work within the framework that we have and that make it better, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and this is one of the things when you're looking at solutions that work within the framework that we have. We also think about working within the infrastructure which we have, the assets which we have. So one of the big approaches that we're taking at Ampaire is by going with hybrid electric planes. We're actually able to fly without necessarily having to have charging infrastructure. A lot like your Toyota Prius or your RAV4 hybrid, you can drive it almost anywhere you want to go, even if it doesn't have a plug. That's really, really important at the beginning of an industry, right? When you are trying to provide connectivity to the masses, to be able to do so without having all these prerequisites of, hundreds of millions of dollars or more of infrastructure upgrade before you can even provide the first flight. That doesn't seem like a practical solution to us. So these hybrids can fly anywhere you want to go. And then the second thing, so I'm reading a book called Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard, and there was this passage in there that was really impactful when I read it, which was the biggest sustainability decision that we can make is about reducing our consumption. And this is about reusing. They were talking about reusing garments, right? Yeah. Sewing up, and rather than selling a new jacket, fix the one you've got. With airplanes, we do the same. We take the planes, instead of just thinking about fancy flying cars and futuristic things, we're taking the planes that are flying today, that are burning carbon today, and we're upgrading them to these hybrid lower carbon solutions. And that is really impactful when you start to think about the total encompassed carbon footprint of manufacturing, as well as the propulsion of these systems.
That is amazing, because of course that is a huge piece of the sustainability question that gets put to the side, I think, a lot, is new things come in, and you go somewhere like Cuba and you see that old cars can be kept running for a very long time. That's right. And that is, in a lot of ways, the most sustainable solution.
Well, the planes that Boeing is building today will be flying for the next 50 to 70 years.
That's crazy.
Over 5 decades is the lifetime of these planes, and oftentimes significantly more. If we're going to have solutions by 2040, 2050, 2070, those planes will be the ones that are already flying, at least part of the fleet. We have to do things that are relevant, and that also enables us to do things that are rapid. We're already flying the world's largest fleet of hybrid electric planes. We've deployed in Hawaii on island hopping in partnership with Elemental Accelerator. We took the plane up to Alaska. We've flown out with airlines in the UK. These are real planes, real technology, and this approach, reusing the existing infrastructure, reusing the existing aircraft, while also designing for the future. The planes that are built down the road, I fully anticipate will use our systems too. This is how you actually drive meaningful change, and it's certainly right at the core of the ethos of the company.
So what can your planes do now in terms of distances? How far can they go? How big are they? And What are you doing at this moment?
Yeah, so I love this because most of the initial conception around electric vehicles is about range anxiety. And if you think about range anxiety while flying, it's not a very pleasant thought, is it? So the longest we've ever flown one of our hybrid electric planes is about 1,200 miles. We flew from California out to Kansas while hopping up to Wisconsin for the country's biggest air show over in Oshkosh. So 1,200 miles, single hop, single charge. Similarly, on this 3,400 mile trek up to Alaska, there wasn't a whole lot of charging infrastructure in the Yukon. And we had to be able to fly to and from any of those airports. So the ability to fly long range, I think, is critical, both, of course, for carrying passengers and cargo and goods, but also for repositioning assets and giving them to the communities that they need most. From the scale of the plane, so this technology scales up through the kind of turboprop class of planes, and we're working with NASA to take it all the way up to the big jets. Right now, we're flying planes that are in the most accessible category for regional flights. So if you go island hopping in Hawaii or in the Bahamas on a luxury eco tour, you'll probably fly in one of these turboprop planes that we're currently using. They're in the kind of 10 to 20 passenger category.
The range anxiety is something that I'm sure in your industry you talk about a lot. I didn't really know what a big thing it was in the electric vehicle industry, but I sat next to a guy at a dinner, at a Volvo event, who was the engineer who deals with the programming for the computers they put inside their electric vehicles. And his entire job basically is how to soothe this range anxiety that people have. It's really thinking about how to make them calm down. Although, I will say I've spent now whenever I rent a car, I rent an electric vehicle. And I've spent a lot of time driving around Europe, and I love them. I love the way they change the experience of driving. They force you to slow down and stop. I think it's I've found it to be a very it sort of enforces a different pace and a different kind of mindfulness around what I'm doing that I like. That having been said, what they say you're going to get and what you actually get can be very far apart, and I have now experienced that anxiety firsthand. So it's definitely something you don't want in an airplane.
Totally, you want to be able to fly anywhere you want to go. Make sure you can get home. So we were flying up into Fairbanks, Alaska from Canada. And it was completely blocked in by clouds and rain. And we choose to not to try to get through that kind of weather, so we had to divert 300 miles back to the origin airport. That kind of a thing, you want to make sure you have plenty of range available. And then on this experience side, one of the most magical moments of this whole endeavor of the last 7.5 years of building Ampere was I was up in one of our hybrid planes, and we shut off the combustion engine, and we flew fully electric over the California coastline. And talk about a magic moment when you just have the wisps of air going by you. You have all the power that you need, right? You're still flying, but you're doing so, and there's no carbon footprint. That it's quiet, it's sustainable. It is truly a magical experience.
Is it silent when you turn off the combustion?
It's very quiet. So there's
a little scary.
Imagine the wind blowing through your car window, so you still get a little bit of whistling, and the wings make noise. The propeller makes a little bit of noise, but cuts it down to very low noise profile.
So what about the weight of the batteries? I feel like in terms of vehicles, I hear a lot about the battery weight. So how are you guys handling that? And then what are you doing to move it forward?
Sure. So when you think about weight, it's generally because that weight displaces something else that you care more about than carrying the extra weight. In the case of our airplanes, airlines like to carry passengers and cargo because that's how they earn their revenue and that's how they stay in business. So if we're too heavy, then they can't carry enough people, then they can't stay in business, so those passengers don't get flights, right? So what we do is we make absolutely certain that we deliver the available payload capacity that these airlines require. So our systems are a little bit heavier, about 500, net out at about 500 pounds heavier than the original system, which on a small airplane is 2.5 passengers. luckily, there's sufficient headroom in the total weight capacity of the plane that we're able to still carry the fully allowed amount of passengers in these planes, or the same volume of cargo when you're talking to one of the big cargo operators, as the aircraft was originally able to carry. So here we are flying as far as the original plane flew, with the same revenue-generating payload as the original plane could fly. This is a good economic value proposition for them, all the while cutting their carbon emissions.
That's really interesting and obviously essential if you're going to sell it to these companies.
It is.
It makes me, the question I guess that comes to mind when you're talking about that is another thing from this Volvo event that I went to. So I had another conversation with their head of safety around how the weight changes the safety of the vehicle, but what they've looked to do is kind of utilize that because they're Volvo and that's their whole thing, is to utilize that to make it more safe, right? And so they had this kind of deconstructed car where you could really see how the battery was being utilized. How does it impact safety in terms of flying, which is everyone's main concern?
Yeah, so I imagine many of the people here flew into New York, but when you got on that plane, you probably didn't have serious questions about whether you'd be safe. Because aviation is the safest mode of transportation today. It is, I think, 1,000 times safer than driving a car. It is safer than walking across the street. And that's not by accident, that's by requirement. So the regulatory bodies, the FAA here in the States, absolutely expect safety to be paramount. And so there are rigorous processes that we go through, and that all aircraft manufacturers go through, to ensure the safety of the aircraft, and to ensure that if anything does go wrong, those planes are able to still operate or land without issue. So for batteries, new technology in aviation, you could imagine that the FAA and others are really, really intent on making sure it's safe. So we have layers upon layers upon layers of operational and mechanical and electrical and software controls and safety mechanisms that ensure that if and when there's ever an issue with the electronics or the batteries, that the plane and the people are still safe. And that's part of why we add a little bit of weight, because it takes materials to go get that done. But it's also, it's table stakes for operating.
Yeah, I guess the other thing that I started thinking about when you were talking about planes being so safe is I recently was on a flight, on a layover in Atlanta, and my flight got wildly delayed because there was some part they needed that wasn't in Atlanta, even though it was a Delta flight and it should be there. And I was talking to one of the flight attendants, and she's like, my dad ran parts for Atlanta, and like if the part's not here, I don't know where it is, But I was thinking about all the infrastructure that's necessary in order to keep a plane moving, and so how are you guys building out that infrastructure for your partners?
Yeah, so this is a really important factor across the life cycle of an aircraft, or really any vehicle. When you take it to the extreme, electric vehicle components, while advanced in technology, are relatively simple mechanically, and from a maintainability, reliability. Tesla owners will talk about the only thing they need are new tires and windshield wiper fluid. This is the kind of maintenance that electric allows. Now, as a hybrid electric, you still have a combustion engine, so you still have some of those things that you need to deal with. So we partner, we've got a partner, Air France KLM, who's a big airline, and they run maintenance, repair, and overhaul shops around the world. So we partner with them and some of the airlines that are going to be our customers in order to establish that footprint of spare parts and make sure that they have them accessible when they need them.
And then what about the sustainability aspect of manufacturing the batteries? I feel like that's a conversation I've been hearing more about recently, really kind of talking about the totality of like what's needed to make these batteries. And I'm sure that's something you think about a lot too.
Absolutely. I think anybody who's serious about mitigating carbon emissions in the world needs to think full scope on the operations that you have. So where are the materials sourced from? How are they put together? How are they used? And what happens after that? And so for us, we look at the source of the batteries. We really, from a volume standpoint, are a small part compared to automotive. So we do ride the coattails of developments and innovations there, both on the supply side, but then also on the recycling side. One of the things that's an interesting opportunity is that if a battery is safe enough to fly, it's probably safe enough for a lot of other applications. And so what if after the battery retires from aviation, ages out, it's probably still actually has plenty of capacity and safety for ground storage at airports or others before putting it into the recycling. I highly recommend anybody who's here go check out some of the materials recycling companies that are over at the Climate Science Fair as well. Really phenomenal, passionate, intelligent people driving game-changing solutions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thank you.